Hey guys, welcome to another edition of LIFM. This is Combo Fiend. I'm going to be showing you my first EDH deck, and the commander is Karador Ghost Chieftain. So he has an ability where he costs one less to cast for each creature in your graveyard, and you may cast on each of your turns one creature card from your graveyard. So basically, the more creatures in your graveyard, the better, because it makes him cheaper. And we all know in EDH, your commander dies. So first, I'm going to run through the land base. Just some basics. There's 7 forests, 7 plains, 7 swamps. Then there's some non-basics. There's 21 of them. First, command tower, of course. Tap for any color. I'm running 3 colors. Pretty good. Some fetch lands. Dual lands. Murmuring Bosk. This comes into play tap, but can tap for any color. Unless you reveal a tree folk, of course. It also will deal 1 damage to you if you tap for white or black. Vivid Meadow just comes into play. Can add any color, so it's always good to be consistent in your colors. The bounce lands, 3 of them. Some pain lands. Here's some lands that function for secondary abilities. So this one will put a 1/1 token into play. This one will enable me to sacrifice a creature, putting some creatures in my graveyard and at the same time drawing a card. This one helps me stay in the game by giving my creature death touch and lifelink, so for offensive and defensive purposes. This deck tends to be mana intensive, so having a lot of mana is always good. This adds 2 to your mana pool at the cost of 2 damage, but in Commander it's not that bad of a trade-off. And the last land I run is Maze of Ith. Why? Just to keep heat off my back. And I think it's a good land. It could fit into almost any EDH deck, so I run it. We're gonna get into some instants. I run 4 instants in this deck. The first one is Unmake. This exiles a creature. Oblation. This is good for dealing with problematic commanders, or if you really need to draw some cards for yourself. Beast Within, this gets rid of any problems or threats, destroys a permanent, and the drawback is not that big. You're giving whatever you destroy that player a 3/3 token, which is not a bad trade-off. This card I like because if you play it on your turn, you can exile up to 2 artifacts or enchantments, and at instant speed 1, but sometimes you just really need to exile things because they're indestructible. We're going to get into the sorceries. There's 6 sorcery spells. Asangigate is a high pick because late in the game, and EDH games can go on for a while, you tend to lose life, and this is a fast way to deal a lot of damage and gain life at the same time, and it affects all opponents, so it's always good. Living Death. This can be used as board wipe and at the same time recursion, and I usually have creatures in my graveyard, so it's usually never a bad time to play. Here's Identity Crisis. This one is kind of mean. This one will exile all cards in target player's graveyard and hand from the game. So, yeah. Praetor's Grasp. I like this card because you get to search through your opponent's library and exile a card. You can then play that card. I like this because it can remove potential threats against me. And if you see something you like other than that, you can just take it, and if the colors are right, play it. Here's some board wipe. Vengeance, Akroma's Vengeance. I really like this because at some point in time the game might get out of hand and you just need to wipe the board and start fresh. And I like creatures in my graveyard, so if some of my stuff die, it's okay. Austere Command, same point, only it's a little more versatile. You can hit either creatures or enchantments, and at times you can hurt your opponent a lot more than the damage done back to you. Angelic Chorus, I like this card because, once again, it can keep me in the game longer. Whenever a creature comes into play under my control, I can gain life equal to its toughness, and creatures are coming into play a lot, whether through my graveyard or from my hand, or they're getting animated. They're coming into play and basically I'm gaining life. Ghostly Prison, this is a classic card. This just keeps threats off your back. You know, early game or late game, it forces your opponent to either give up his mana or not attack. You just attack someone else, and that's always good. Bitter Blossom, this is really good, especially if you get it early game at the cost of 1 life. During your upkeep, you can put a 1/1 flying fairy creature token into play, and it can serve for attacking, blocking, sacking, a whole lot of purposes. It's always good. The Leyline of Sanctity. This can come into play if you open your hand with it, and it basically gives you hexproof. So it protects you from a lot of spells basically targeting you, and that tends to happen in EDH. Martyr's Bond, this is like a Grave Pact on steroids. Excuse me. Whenever this enchantment or another non-land permanent you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, each opponent sacrifices a permanent that shares a card type with it. So whether it's creature, enchantment, artifact, planeswalker, if they kill yours, they're going to have to sack something as well. Awakening Zone, this is good because it puts creatures into play, so they can be used as chump blockers, and these creatures can sack for mana, so it can accelerate your moves as well at the same time, so I like it. Here's a fun card, Debtor's Kneel. At the beginning of your upkeep, put target creature card from any graveyard into play under your control, so if your opponent has something that looks appealing, or just maybe even you, whatever the case may be, it's always good. You know you're getting something. Aura Shards, this is really good in this deck because I showed you Awakening Zone and Bitter Blossom. Cards like that put tokens into play interact really well with this. So creatures are always coming into play. Things are getting destroyed. Artifacts and enchantments are widely run in EDH, so you're most likely going to hit something. This just puts you in a privileged position. It's really good when people can't target your things. Basically, everything I own becomes untargetable except for this. So when people can't destroy my things, I like it. This card allows me to exile a creature I control and return it to battlefield at the beginning of my end step. This I just use as a flicker effect. It can be used with any creature, almost. A lot of creatures in this deck. And it's good when you can, flicker cards like Runescarred Demon and stuff like that, and reuse his ability. So I included this. Revoker's good because he can be used in lots of situations, and especially in Commander. If there's a problematic commander with an activated ability, you can just stop it with this. Crucible of Worlds I like in case my lands get destroyed. I can always bring them back. I also run some milling in the deck, so they can always be recurred. And I also have the fetch lands that I showed you earlier. They also work real nice. I have this Wellspring. When this comes into play, I just basically search for a land, which is good, and also when it leaves play. And I have outlets of sacking this, so yeah. Quicksilver Amulet. This just puts a creature into play at instant speed, so it's always good. Elixir. This can gain me life if I need it, but the real purpose is to protect my graveyard and make sure that I don't mill myself. Claws of Jix. This allows me to pay 1 and sacrifice a permanent to gain life, and this is just basically a sack outlet, and it's efficient, so I run it. Sun Droplet. This just keeps me in the game in case I'm dealt early damage. Top. There's Duplicant to take care of problematic creatures. Here's the milling I was talking about, the Mesmeric Orb. It's not favored by a lot of players, but it tends to put creatures in graveyards real fast, and my deck likes that, so I run it. The Death Mantle is just a good equipment, whether it's a power boost, it turns your creature black, and it can save my creatures from dying. Skull Clamp. It's a good equipment. I can draw cards if my creatures die, and it runs a lot of tokens, this deck. Well, not a lot of tokens, but the previous enchantments I showed you. It's good to clamp those tokens, just easy card draw. Wellspring. This is like the other Wellspring I showed you. When it comes into play or is put into a graveyard, I can draw a card. Same concept. Spine of Ishsa. This is just removal, and same kind of concept as those other two. Karn, mainly used for removal. Here's a card that I can use its ability to flicker, sort of like Conjurer's Closet that was shown earlier, for same purposes. Fierce Empath. This is a creature tutor. I run a lot of creatures with big mana cost, so this basically gets anyone I need. This guy's good. He's a solid 3/3 body, and I can sack him to make my creatures indestructible. He brings back a creature for me. Micaeus, he's really good as long as he's in play. If any one of my other creatures die, basically they're coming back, and they're coming back stronger, so I run him. This guy puts creature tokens into play, and at the same time he can put creatures in my graveyard, so I like him in here. This guy can be used as removal or a tutor card for a creature, and I always like searching for creatures and, if need be, removing something. He's a solid 3/3 body, so I run him. This guy, he can just clear the board of, maybe problematic things that you have no answer to, and yeah. Here's Iona. She's a big body, 7/7 flyer, and she stops people from playing spells, so she's good. Shieldred was a must include. She has a nice body, a 6/6 swamp walk, and it causes your opponents to sack creatures, and you get back your creatures at the beginning of your upkeep, and that's always good because there's always creatures in the graveyard. Oromancer, this will just get back an enchantment. Dark Imposter, I like him. He can exile creatures and take their activated abilities, so he's very versatile, and he doesn't cost much. 3 for 2/2, so he's really good in my books. Butcher Malachor, a common theme in this deck is my creatures dying. So when they die, this guy is basically a grave pact that with a 5/4 body, and it flies, so always good. Fleshbag, when he comes into play, each player sacks a creature. Everyone else sacks a creature. If I sack a creature, I don't really care. Angel of Despair, when she comes into play, she hits anything, and that's always good, and a good 5/5 body. Avacyn, everything's indestructible. Not much more needs to be said. Safi, this can save a creature, one of my creatures, from dying, and puts a creature in my graveyard, so always good. Runescarred for some tutoring with a nice body. Gave's like my secondary commander. He can put tokens, sack creatures for me. He can even work with Mikaeus to remove counters of creatures that have been brought back. So he's very versatile, and he's 5 for 5/5, so I see no reason not to run him. Eternal Witness, superstar. She just brings back anything in my graveyard, and there's always things in my graveyard, so she's always good. Treasure Hunter, returns artifact. And last but not least, Sun Titan. Sun Titan's really good. He brings back a lot of things in my deck. If you're to go through and look, he hits a lot of things, so I run him. He's a 6/6 vigilance, and he triggers when he enters the battlefield or attacks, so he's a must include in the deck. And that's everything. Thanks for watching. Please feel free to comment and just share your opinions. Thanks.